Lieutenant Sarah Martinez walked through the crowded mess hall at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California. The familiar sound of metal trays clanging and loud conversations filled the air. She had just finished a brutal 14-hour training session with her intelligence unit, and her uniform showed the sweat and dirt from the day's work. At 28 years old, Sarah had worked harder than most people could imagine to earn her position as an intelligence officer in the Navy. She came from a small town in Texas where her father worked at a gas station, and her mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. When Sarah told her parents she wanted to join the military, they worried she wasn't tough enough for such a demanding life, but Sarah proved everyone wrong. She graduated top of her class from the Naval Academy, completed advanced intelligence training, and earned respect from her colleagues through pure determination and skill. She specialized in gathering and analyzing information that helped keep troops safe during dangerous missions. As she carried her dinner tray looking for an empty seat, Sarah noticed a group of Navy SEALs sitting at a corner table. These elite special operations soldiers were known throughout the military as the toughest and most skilled warriors in the world. Their intense training programs were legendary, and only a small percentage of candidates ever made it through. The SEALs were laughing loudly about something, their voices carrying across the room. Sarah had worked with SEAL teams before on intelligence missions, and most of them treated her with professional respect. They understood that good intelligence could mean the difference between a successful mission and a disaster. She found an empty table near the window and sat down to eat her meal in peace. The California sunset painted the sky in brilliant orange and pink colors, and she could see the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly toward the horizon. These quiet moments were rare in her demanding schedule, and she treasured them. From across the room, she could still hear the SEALs talking and joking with each other. Their conversation seemed to be getting louder and more animated as time went on. Sarah tried to focus on her food and ignore the noise, but something about their tone made her pay attention. One of the SEALs, a muscular man with short blonde hair, seemed to be the center of attention. His voice was louder than the others, and he kept gesturing wildly as he told some kind of story. The other men at his table were laughing and encouraging him to continue. Sarah had learned early in her military career to be aware of her surroundings at all times. This skill had served her well in both training and real-world situations. Something about the energy at that table felt different from normal friendly conversation between teammates. She glanced over and noticed the blonde SEAL pointing in her direction. A cold feeling settled in her stomach as she realized they might be talking about her. She had experienced this kind of attention before, unfortunately. Some military men still struggled with the idea of women serving in combat-related roles. The pointing became more obvious, and she could see other people in the mess hall starting to notice the commotion. The SEAL's voice grew even louder, though she couldn't make out his exact words from where she sat. Whatever he was saying seemed to be entertaining his friends greatly. Sarah had two choices. She could finish her meal quickly and leave to avoid any potential confrontation, or she could stand her ground and deal with whatever was coming her way. Throughout her career, she had learned that running away from problems usually made them worse. She took a deep breath and continued eating her dinner at a normal pace. If these SEALs wanted to cause trouble, she would handle it with the same professionalism she brought to every other challenge in her military service. She had not come this far in her career by backing down from difficult situations. The blonde SEAL stood up from his table, and Sarah could see he was even bigger than she had initially thought. He had to be at least 6 feet 3 inches tall, with the kind of muscled build that came from years of intense physical training. His uniform displayed multiple ribbons and medals that showed he had seen real combat in dangerous places around the world. As he walked toward her table, Sarah noticed the mess hall was getting quieter. Other sailors and officers were starting to pay attention to what was happening. Word traveled fast in military environments, and people could sense when a confrontation was brewing. The SEAL stopped directly in front of Sarah's table and looked down at her with a smirk on his face. His name tag read Thompson, and she could see from his uniform that he held the rank of Petty Officer First Class. Behind him, his friends were still sitting at their table, watching the scene unfold with obvious amusement. "Well, well," Thompson said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Look what we have here. A little lieutenant thinks she belongs in the same mess hall as real warriors." His voice carried a mocking tone that made Sarah's jaw clench with anger. Sarah continued eating her dinner without looking up at him. She had learned that responding too quickly to provocations often made situations worse. Sometimes ignoring bullies was the best strategy, even when every instinct told her to fight back. "I'm talking to you, Lieutenant," Thompson continued, emphasizing her rank in a way that made it sound like an insult. "Don't you think it's disrespectful to ignore a decorated combat veteran when he's speaking to you?" The mess hall was now almost completely quiet. Everyone was watching to see how this confrontation would play out. Sarah could feel dozens of eyes on her as she finally looked up to meet Thompson's gaze. His eyes were cold and challenging, like a predator sizing up potential prey. "I heard you perfectly well, Petty Officer Thompson," Sarah said in a calm, steady voice. "I'm just trying to enjoy my dinner after a long day of work, same as everyone else here." Thompson laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Work? You call sitting in an air-conditioned office looking at computer screens work? That's not real military service, sweetheart. That's just playing dress-up in a uniform." The insult hit Sarah like a physical blow, but she kept her expression neutral. She had dealt with this attitude before from men who believed that only combat soldiers deserved respect in the military. They didn't understand or appreciate the vital role that intelligence officers played in keeping everyone safe. "Intelligence work is essential to mission success," Sarah replied evenly. "Without accurate information, even the best soldiers can walk into disasters." Thompson leaned down closer to her table, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that still carried throughout the quiet room. "Listen here, little girl. Playing with computers doesn't make you a real soldier. You're just taking up space that could go to someone who actually belongs here." Sarah felt her heart rate increase, but she forced herself to remain calm. She knew that losing her temper would only prove Thompson's point and potentially damage her reputation. Military women had to be twice as professional as men to receive the same level of respect. "I earned my commission through the same naval academy that many officers in this room attended," Sarah said quietly. "I completed the same training requirements and passed the same tests as everyone else." "Tests," Thompson scoffed. "I've been in real firefights where people were trying to kill me. I've carried wounded teammates to safety under enemy fire. That's what real military service looks like, not sitting in meetings and writing reports." The tension in the room was becoming unbearable. Sarah could see other officers looking uncomfortable, but no one was stepping in to stop the confrontation. She realized she was on her own to handle this situation, just like she had been so many times before in her career. Sarah slowly stood up from her chair, maintaining eye contact with Thompson the entire time. Even at her full height of 5 feet 6 inches, she had to look up to meet his gaze, but her posture radiated confidence and determination. The mess hall remained dead silent, with everyone waiting to see what would happen next. "Petty Officer Thompson," Sarah said in a voice that carried clearly throughout the room, "I respect your combat experience and the sacrifices you've made for our country. But you seem to have some misconceptions about what intelligence work actually involves." Thompson crossed his arms over his chest and rolled his eyes. "Oh, this should be good. Please enlighten us about your dangerous computer work, Lieutenant." Sarah could feel the weight of everyone's attention on her. This moment would likely be talked about for weeks throughout the base, and how she handled it would affect her reputation and relationships with colleagues. She took a deep breath and made a decision that would surprise everyone in the room. 3 months ago, you and your team were deployed to a compound in Syria to extract a high-value target, Sarah began, her voice steady and professional. "The mission briefing you received included detailed building layouts, guard positions, patrol schedules, and escape routes." Thompson's confident smirk began to fade slightly. He obviously recognized the mission she was describing, but he wasn't sure where she was going with this information. "That intelligence package took my team 6 weeks to compile," Sarah continued. We analyzed satellite imagery, intercepted communications, coordinated with local assets, and cross-referenced dozens of sources to ensure accuracy. Every piece of information in that briefing was verified multiple times because we knew lives depended on it. The SEAL shifted uncomfortably, and Sarah could see uncertainty creeping into his expression. She pressed on, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. During the mission, you encountered an unexpected patrol that wasn't supposed to be there according to the original intelligence. Your team leader called for updated information, and within 8 minutes, my team had identified the patrol's route and provided you with 3 alternate extraction paths. Thompson was no longer smiling. Sarah could see recognition in his eyes as he remembered the details of that particular mission. Other people in the mess hall were leaning forward, fascinated by this unexpected turn in the conversation. That quick response required real-time analysis of multiple data streams, coordination with drone operators, and constant communication with field assets while you and your team were under pressure, Sarah explained. My team worked for 14 straight hours that day to ensure you all came home safely. The room was so quiet that Sarah could hear the distant sound of waves crashing on the beach outside the base. Thompson opened his mouth as if to respond, but no words came out. He was clearly struggling to process this new information. The high-value target you successfully captured provided information that prevented 3 planned terrorist attacks, Sarah continued. Those attacks would have killed dozens of innocent civilians in European cities. The success of your mission created a chain of events that saved lives around the world. Sarah paused for a moment to let her words sink in. She could see Thompson's teammates at their table looking uncomfortable and uncertain. The confident atmosphere that had surrounded their group just minutes before had completely evaporated. So when you say that intelligence work isn't real military service, Sarah said, her voice carrying a slight edge of steel, you're not just insulting me. You're insulting every analyst who worked around the clock to keep you alive during that mission. You're dismissing the value of information that made your success possible. Thompson's face had gone pale, and sweat was beginning to form on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning in the mess hall. Sarah could see that he was starting to understand the full scope of what she was telling him. Sarah wasn't finished. The years of dealing with condescending attitudes and proving herself over and over again had built up inside her, and now she had the perfect opportunity to make her point clear. She stepped closer to Thompson, her voice remaining calm but carrying unmistakable authority. Let me tell you about some of the other computer work my team has done recently, Sarah continued. Last month, we identified a weapons smuggling operation that was supplying explosives to terrorist groups in 3 different countries. Our analysis led to raids that seized enough explosive material to level city blocks. Thompson tried to interrupt, but Sarah held up her hand and kept speaking. The gesture was small, but it commanded respect in a way that surprised everyone watching, including Thompson himself. 2 weeks ago, we traced communication patterns that revealed a planned attack on a military convoy in Afghanistan. Because of our computer work, that convoy was rerouted, and 12 soldiers came home to their families instead of being killed or wounded by roadside bombs. The impact of Sarah's words was visible throughout the mess hall. Other service members were nodding in recognition, finally understanding the crucial role that intelligence work played in their own safety and mission success. Several SEAL team members who had initially been laughing with Thompson now looked embarrassed and uncomfortable. Yesterday, my team intercepted communications about a hostage situation involving American civilians in Somalia, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with each example. We provided real-time intelligence to the rescue team that allowed them to extract all hostages safely without a single casualty. Thompson's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. He clearly wanted to say something, but he couldn't find words to counter the specific examples Sarah was providing. Each story demonstrated the direct impact of intelligence work on saving lives and protecting American interests. You want to know what real danger looks like in intelligence work? Sarah asked, taking another step closer to Thompson. 3 years ago, I spent 4 months undercover in a terrorist organization in Pakistan. gathering information about planned attacks on American targets. The mess hall buzzed with surprised whispers. Undercover work was extremely dangerous, requiring intelligence officers to live for months among people who would kill them instantly if their true identities were discovered. Every day for 4 months. I woke up knowing that a single mistake could result in torture and death, Sarah continued. I had to maintain my cover while secretly documenting terrorist plans, training methods, and target lists. I couldn't carry weapons, I couldn't communicate with backup, and I couldn't trust anyone around me. Thompson's arrogant expression had completely disappeared. He was staring at Sarah with a mixture of shock and growing respect. The woman he had dismissed as a desk-bound officer had actually put her life on the line in ways he had never imagined. The information I gathered during that operation led to the disruption of a network planning coordinated attacks on American embassies in 6 countries, Sarah explained. 23 terrorists were captured and dozens of innocent lives were saved. Sarah paused and looked directly into Thompson's eyes. So tell me, Petty Officer Thompson, exactly which part of that work doesn't qualify as real military service? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Thompson struggled to find a response, but every argument he might have made had been systematically demolished by Sarah's examples. He was beginning to understand that his assumptions about intelligence work had been completely wrong. I didn't know, Thompson finally managed to say, his voice much quieter than it had been moments before. The confident bully who had approached Sarah's table was gone, replaced by a man who was clearly questioning everything he thought. He knew about military service. Sarah could see the exact moment when Thompson realized the full scope of his mistake. His face flushed red with embarrassment, and he looked around the mess hall as if suddenly aware of all the people who had witnessed his humiliation. Sarah could see that Thompson was genuinely shaken by what he had learned, but she wasn't ready to let him off the hook just yet. She had spent years dealing with attitudes like his, and this was an opportunity to educate not just Thompson, but everyone else who was listening. There's something else you should understand about intelligence work, Sarah said, her voice taking on a teaching tone. When we make mistakes, people die. When we miss a detail or misinterpret information, missions fail and soldiers don't come home. The pressure is constant and unforgiving. She gestured toward the other people in the mess hall. Every person in this room depends on accurate intelligence to do their job safely and effectively. Pilots need to know about enemy air defenses. Ground troops need to know about IED locations. And special operations teams need detailed information about their targets. Thompson nodded slowly, finally beginning to grasp the interconnected nature of military operations. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by what looked like genuine curiosity about work he had never bothered to understand. The reason I can give you such specific examples of successful operations, Sarah continued, is because I was personally involved in every one of them. I wasn't sitting safely in an office pushing papers. I was analyzing life-or-death information under incredible pressure, knowing that my decisions would directly affect whether missions succeeded or failed. Sarah turned to address the wider audience in the mess hall. Intelligence officers go through the same basic military training as everyone else, plus additional specialized training that can last for years. We learn multiple languages, study foreign cultures, master advanced technology, and develop analytical skills that allow us to find patterns in massive amounts of data. The room remained completely silent as Sarah continued her explanation. Many of the service members listening had never heard such a detailed description of what intelligence work actually involved. We work with classified information that could start wars or prevent them, Sarah said. We have security clearances that require extensive background checks and polygraph tests. We take oaths to protect national secrets that are just as sacred as any oath taken by combat soldiers. Thompson was now looking at Sarah with something approaching admiration. The transformation in his attitude was remarkable and obvious to everyone watching. He had gone from mocking her service to recognizing that he had severely underestimated both her and her profession. "Ma'am," Thompson said quietly, using a respectful form of address that he had pointedly avoided earlier. "I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about your work without understanding what it actually involved." Sarah nodded acknowledgement of his apology, but she could see that he still didn't fully grasp the broader implications of his behavior. She decided to help him understand the real problem with attitudes like his. "Petty Officer Thompson, your apology is appreciated," Sarah said. "But this isn't really about me personally. The problem is that your attitude represents a broader lack of understanding about how modern military operations actually work." She gestured toward his teammates, who were still sitting at their table looking uncomfortable. "Every successful SEAL mission involves dozens of support personnel who never get recognition or glory. Intelligence analysts, communications specialists, logistics coordinators, medical personnel, and many others all contribute to your success." Thompson's teammates were now paying close attention to Sarah's words. Several of them looked like they were having their own moments of realization about people they might have dismissed or undervalued. "When you dismiss the value of support roles," Sarah continued, "you're not just insulting individuals. You're perpetuating a culture that fails to recognize the teamwork and coordination required for modern military success." Sarah looked around the mess hall one final time, making eye contact with various service members who had been watching the confrontation. She could see that her words had impact beyond just Thompson and his immediate circle of friends. "The strongest military force in the world isn't built on individual heroics," Sarah said, her voice carrying to every corner of the now silent room. "It's built on mutual respect, professional competence, and understanding that every role contributes to our shared mission of protecting our country." She turned back to Thompson, who was now standing at attention despite not being ordered to do so. His entire demeanor had changed from the arrogant bully who had approached her table to a service member showing genuine respect to a superior officer. "Your combat experience is valuable and deserves recognition," Sarah told him. "But so does the work of every other person wearing this uniform. We all took the same oath to defend our country, and we all make sacrifices to honor that commitment." Thompson swallowed hard before responding. "Lieutenant Martinez, you're absolutely right. I let my ego and ignorance cloud my judgment. That's not the kind of sailor or teammate I want to be." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Sarah could see that this experience had genuinely changed his perspective in a way that would likely affect how he treated other service members in the future. "I would be honored to learn more about intelligence work," Thompson continued. "Maybe my team could better support future missions if we understood what goes into the information we receive." Sarah smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. "I think that's an excellent idea, Petty Officer Thompson. Understanding each other's roles makes everyone more effective." She extended her hand to Thompson, who shook it firmly. The gesture symbolized not just the end of their conflict, but the beginning of a new understanding between them. As Thompson walked back to his table, Sarah could hear conversations starting up throughout the mess hall. People were discussing what they had just witnessed and reflecting on their own attitudes toward different military roles. One of Thompson's teammates approached Sarah's table. "Man, that was incredible," he said quietly. "I never realized how much work went into the intelligence we received before missions. We all owe you and your team a debt of gratitude." Over the next few weeks, word of the confrontation spread throughout the base. Rather than focusing on Thompson's humiliation, most people talked about Sarah's professionalism and the educational value of her response. Several other intelligence officers reported that they were being treated with new respect by colleagues who had previously dismissed their work. Thompson himself became one of Sarah's strongest advocates. He arranged for his entire SEAL team to receive briefings about intelligence operations, and he frequently spoke about the importance of supporting all military roles. The experience had transformed him from someone who divided the military into real soldiers and support staff into someone who understood the interconnected nature of modern warfare. Sarah continued her work with the same dedication and professionalism she had always shown. but she noticed that the atmosphere around the base had shifted slightly. There seemed to be more mutual respect between different military specialties and less tolerance for the kind of dismissive attitudes that had once been common. The incident became a teaching moment that extended far beyond that evening in the mess hall. It demonstrated that true strength comes not from putting others down, but from understanding and appreciating the diverse skills and contributions that make military success possible. Years later, when Thompson achieved his goal of becoming a SEAL instructor, he would often tell new recruits about the night he learned the difference between being tough and being wise. He would explain that real warriors don't need to diminish others to prove their worth, and that the strongest teams are built on mutual respect and understanding. Sarah's response that evening had achieved something remarkable. She had defended not just herself, but every service member whose contributions were undervalued or misunderstood. Her words had created ripple effects that would improve relationships and effectiveness throughout the military community for years to come.